Chapter 20. From his haste, Galloway had never expected to find anyone waiting here, and as Pat had planned, the shot outside in the yard had deceived him. He still looked forward to the sanctuary and the ranch house, perhaps intending to barricade himself inside. Equally confident, Pike Taggart crowded through the door at his heels. Their surprise was complete. Pat's sledgehammer blow catching Mace alongside the head tumbled him crashing into the door, and Taggart stumbled over his legs. It was due to the wiry foreman banging against him that Pat was unable instantly to lay hands on that outlaw leader and thus place him under custody. Lawler sprang forward and hauled Taggart out of the heap with an iron grip upon his bony shoulder. Quick as a cat, Pike whirled around defensively. He succeeded in kicking the lawman's legs out from under him, and the latter went down. Desperate, Taggart sprang up then, only in time to face young Morgan as the sinewy redhead, eyes ablaze, closed in. Meanwhile, the door had saved Mace from going to the floor. Gathering his dismayed wits in a flash, he slipped backwards into the room, avoiding Stephen's lunging grab, his hand streaking to his hip. Pat's superior speed with a gun stood him in good stead now, and well aware of how many were in this room, without time to check positions, he shot low. Aiming at the gun coming up in Galloway's beefy hand, he missed, but Mace's right leg sagged. His Colt crashed to bury a slug into the floorboards. Recovering balance after a sideways stagger, Mace instantly whirled. Somehow he managed to reach Candace and hurl her between them. Holding his fire, Pat watched the man bound, limping, up the rustic stairs. The cool rancher was making for the second floor. Starting that way, Pat flashed a look behind him. Taggart was slugging it out wildly with Ray, fear making up for whatever he had lost in vigorous youth. Sheriff Lawler attempted to end the matter by closing in from the side, his big arms reaching out. "Stay in the way, Lawler," Ray panted, sharply bleak of face. "Taggart's had this coming from me, and whatever else is awaiting for him." Jess paused. "Well, better just take it easy on him, boy," he warned. A rattle of shots drifted through the open door from the ranch yard, wrenching his attention around. Assured the girl was safe at the moment, he sprang that way, reaching for his gun. Taggart had eyes only for Morgan. His six-gun had tumbled from the sheath at his first fall, ever since had been scuffling around underfoot, tantalizingly near. The man dared not plunge for it blindly, but he was cannily maneuvering towards it, flailing blows and watching his chance narrowly. Candace saw the gun. She darted forward to scoop it up, only to be knocked roughly aside. "Hold him, Ray," she cried lowly, bracing for another try. "Knock him away from the gun." Taggart knew it could not go on for long. Morgan came boring in. His punishing blows rocked the flag foreman. Blocking desperately, Pike unleashed a treacherous kick at Ray's groin, and the instant the young man gave ground, dancing nimbly back. Taggart pounced like a striking snake for the gun, both hands grappling. Ray must have been on guard for such a play. His own boot caught up, catching the antagonist on the point of the shoulder, and tumbled him over backwards. In a twinkling, the girl reached in and snatched up the gun. She got it. Coming to his feet in a flash, Taggart caught a glimpse of it in her hands, and with a yell he charged. Morgan intercepted his rush. Ray seemed to have gone berserk. Handling Taggart as he might a child, he hurled the other man across the room. Pike struck the wood stove, knocking it flying with a noisy crash. Blazing pine chunks scattered about the floor, and with a lusty yell of pain, Taggart recovered, returning doggedly to the attack. Badly shaken as he wasn't done yet. Smoke hazed the room with a choking fog as Candace ran to kick out the blazing embers, attempting to stamp them out. It was a fruitless hope. Already the resinous pine wall had caught fire. The girl grabbed up a tattered saddle pad and began flailing desperately. It was useless. In the face of her strenuous effort, the flames crept up the wall and began to spread. "Get back!" Ray yelled at her. Your clothes will catch fire. He was far too busy to catch more than a flickering glimpse of her activities, yet still she persisted, and in his alarm for her, Ray's watchfulness momentarily strayed, and Taggart promptly took full advantage of his opportunity. After slugging the young man and tumbling him sideways, the foreman turned and fled. Whether he got turned around in his excitement or not, he ignored the outside door which led to freedom. It was into an inner room that he darted, the door of which was already wreathed with curling flames. Sheriff Lawler bounded in from the yard just as Pike disappeared. "Scoot around the house," Ray hurled at him. "Taggart's going to jump out a window and make his getaway." Just halted him before he could act out his own words. "Hold it, boy. No reason why you can't go right in after him. He can't get out of there. Galloway's boarded up that side of the house for winter." Morgan whirled about towards the inner room and then halted after a couple steps. The door was a wall of crackling flames that would have given any sensible man pause. "Come on out, Taggart," he said, guarding his face from the heat. "Make it fast. You're going to be fried to a crisp." There was no sound whatsoever. They heard Taggart pounding in there in a frenzy, but they could see nothing. Dusky enough it was, the room was already a lurid inferno of broiling smoke laced with flickering, ominous orange light. It was all they could do to keep from making a break to the open themselves. "Taggart, come on back," Sheriff Lawler bellowed, but the murderer didn't appear. Outside, the storm was increasing materially in violence. It seemed only to aid to the fury of the confrontation which by now was hungrily enveloping a sizable portion of the lower floor. Wild draughts sucked into the building, and the leaping flames billowed out as if to envelope them all. Gasping and choking, Candace staggered back, and Morgan sprang to her. "Get down and crawl on your knees," he cried out. "Hang on to me and we'll make for the door. I'll lead you." They sank down, Lawler following their own example, and Ray literally hauled the girl to the front door. "There, out in the open. Stay away from the walls." He thrust her quickly away and then turned to Lawler, raising his voice. "What about Stevens, Lawler?" He was forced to lean close to make himself heard above the crackling roar. "He's upstairs after Galloway." Jess looked back, his eyes smarting in a stream. He spread his hands. "It's too late, boy. Look at them blazing stairs. You'd crash right through if you aren't singed to death halfways up." It was undeniably true. The stairway leading up to the second floor was a roaring flue, up or down which no man could pass again. Lawler lent emphasis to his words by forcing the other back. "Get clear. The whole building might cave in soon." "But we can't leave Stevens to face that alone." Little as they guessed of Pat's true situation, they could scarcely have been relieved had they been able to see him at that moment. On racing up the stairs some minutes before, Galloway had halted at the top to fire downward. Pat's slug fluttered through his clothes, stinging the hide, forcing him on. He made it to the far end of the building down a long, narrow hall, then dodged in the first door, and there he took his stand, gun muzzle peeping out. Pat's merciless fire split the door jamb, throwing splinters into his face, and Mace ran on. Only his limp saved him from being hit again, for he could not run in a straight line. Plunging in the last door, he hurled himself to the floor and threw a hail of lead down the gloomy hall. It forced Pat to delay, hidden in a door, and for long, critical moments the deadly duel stretched out, a stalemate. Pat was not sure whether he first grew aware of the thin smoke tainting the dead air of the closed rooms. In a matter of minutes it became thick and ropey. Glancing about, he saw tongues of flames leaking up the stairwell, and he was able to read the truth, his jaws clamped shut. "This is it, Galloway. The place is on fire. I'm coming after you." Hard on the heels of the stringent words, Pat sprang down the hall. No bullets rained upon him, and there was no crashing gunfire whatsoever to menace his progress, and within 10 steps, sheer prudence hauled him up short. Galloway was no longer laying there where he had flung himself down. Where was he? Mace had in fact crawled round to a side door and into the next adjoining room, nearer to Pat's position. Having crept forward, he posted himself against the open hall door, gun poised, ready to blast Pat from behind when he came charging past. There was little enough time for success or failure. Smoke oozed through the cracks in the floor at his feet, and heat was like an oven. The thickening haze tickled his nostrils, threatened an explosive sneeze. Mace fought it back. Nerves strung like wire, the renegade leader knew just how precarious his chances were. Pat Stevens had blocked and frustrated him from the moment of their first clash. Mace meant to shoot that man down ruthlessly without compassion. Crouching here in a cougarish readiness, ears on the stretch, he heard nothing, till a floorboard creaked faintly behind him. Scalp suddenly a-crawling, Mace whirled about furiously, his gun barrel describing a glittering arc. He was too late. Standing in the door behind him, which Galloway had forgotten, Pat fired once with deliberate aim. Mace's Colt leapt out of his grasp as this snatched away and bound away when Pat's still smoking gun was trained unswervingly on his heaving chest. "All right, Mace, vacation's over." Pat's voice rang out flatly. "I'm afraid you'll have to go back with Lawler after all." For an instant, Mace weighed a last desperate play, his stony eyes bleak. He shrugged then, taut sinews relaxing. "Well, you take the kitty, Stevens. That is, if we can get ourselves out of this furnace." Both knew how tense the situation was. To face the stairs now was out of the question. Choking, eye-burning smoke filled the rooms, and the heat expanded by the minute. The crackling roar of the Holocaust below could be plainly heard. Pat picked up Mace's gun, then waved him to the farthest room. "There'll have to be a window for us." "Man, I can hardly hobble." Hope gone, Galloway was truly in bad shape. Blood ran down his pant legs, and squelching in his boots. He could hardly stand his weight on his right leg. That drop will kill me for sure." "Well, it might save us all the trouble then," responded Pat with cool grimness. "Get to a window. Get it open and quick." "But they're barred, Stevens." "All right, stand aside." Wielding a chair, Pat smashed out the rustic sash, glass tinkling. A boot heel, lusty applied, served to bust open the wooden storm blind. Biting, cold air, laden with snow, rushed in at them. I can't." Mace stared down the 20-foot drop, shivering, his voice husky. "I'll never make it. Maybe them stairs—" Pat laughed at him harshly. "Found your weak spot, have I? You'll make it, Galloway, and face the due process of law afterwards if I have to kick you out." He leaned out the opening, breathing deep the pure, life-giving oxygen. "Sam! Sam!" he bellowed. The stocky young man heard him and came running. "Catch this whiny baby if he has to fall on you," snapped Pat. "Now, Galloway." Mace, groaning and climbing awkwardly out, grasped him by the thick wrists, and Pat lowered him as far as possible and let go. Sam and Galloway fell in a heap. Standing beside them on all fours with a grunt, Pat helped haul their captive up. "Where's Ray and the girl and Lawler?" "Oh, don't worry, they got out. But Taggard's in there, Stevens. He wouldn't come out. I guess he's done for." The news failed to jar Mace. "So Pike took the short way. I didn't think he had what it takes. At that, I don't know, but maybe he was wise." "What about Galloway's crew?" Pat interrupted curtly, glancing about. The silent, swirling snow made it difficult to see much. Sam grinned. Oh, they're all washed up, Stevens. Them that didn't run. Reckon a pair got away. It seems that Ezra and old Cowan got wind that something was afoot there in town. So they rode up from Dutch Springs just in time to close in from across the yard just as the fight was starting. And boy, it was a string of fish. Arkansas cashed his chips and sudden and old Pop, and ain't sure of the others. Ute disappeared, though. Anyhow, Galloway ain't got much support left this side of the mountain. Mace scowled in this satirical truism. Before more could be said, a man ran up, peering through the snow. It was Cowan. "Where's my girl, Galloway?" he whipped out. "Aw, she's safe," Sam quickly supplied. "And Morgan?" "Okay, too, Cowan." Pat looked at him in surprise. Pat grabbed the rancher's arm. "Changed your mind, have you?" he asked briskly. Old Zep shot him a look. "Hell, I'll crawl to the boy, Stevens. I've been learning fast today. Right now, I gotta make sure that Candace is all right, though." "Oh, sure. They're just around in front here, Cowan." The whole front of the Flag Ranch house was ablaze now and was burning fiercely. Sheriff Lawler, Morgan, and Candace were standing a considerable distance apart, with a shielded face watching the spectacle. Ezra was with them. Lawler turned as the other group came up. "Old Taggart never come out, Stevens," he gestured. "He's faced judge and jury by this time, and sentence seems to have been passed." Pat nodded his comprehension. "Pike might have been hit along there at the last. Anyways, that's the way it had to be, but I hauled Galloway to the fire for you, Jess." He turned the crestfallen renegade over, and for his part, Cowan had eyes only for his daughter. "Candace!" he choked. The girl's face brightened, yet she moved towards him with a noble reserve of enthusiasm. "Dad, you found me at last. I'm perfectly all right." Her words tumbled out swiftly. It was Ray who saved me from the fire." "Yes, Cowan." Morgan's lean face was flushed and determined. "I helped take her away from Galloway after he had hid her in his camp. I'm serving notice now that I'm taking her away from you too, if necessary." "You will ya?" The seamed leathery old cowhand was gruff. "So what do you want me to say to that?" The younger man had girded himself sternly for this meeting. Plainly he expected Candace's father to rant and rave, and just as clearly as he'd made up his mind this time to remain firm. "Well, naturally, I can't help what you say." His tone expressed his regretful remorse, confronting the elderly rancher's eye to eye. "I never expected you to like hearing that I intend to marry your daughter." "Why, Ray!" Candace let out a squeal which had no kinship with dismay. "What a perfectly wonderful way to propose!" Brown eyes laughing with love, she stepped into his surprised arms in complete disregard of her father. Cowan watched them for a space of a moment. He glanced over his glasses at Lawler, and wiping what may have been a grim smile off his crusty old work-hardened hand. "Well, if you both look at it that way," he growled, pretending a reluctant concession. "Dad!" The girl's frank surprise must have been delicious to him. Her blonde, snow-spangled hair tossing, she flung herself at her dad, clasping her tight. "You'd consent to having Ray as your son? You'll come to the Star-Crossed to visit us?" It was Pat who sheered to the main issue, putting in a word. "Fine, but let's have the sheriff's slant on this," he proposed. "We'll all want to count on Morgan be out of jail in time for his wedding." "Well, I'm out now, Stevens, and for good." The star-crossed redhead fired up hotly. Striding towards Galloway, once more in Roof Dad's custody, he fetched him a smart box alongside the head. "Tell them how you kept riding on me, Galloway, and getting me all in my troubles. I want Lawler and all of them to hear this." Mace swept them with a glance of ugly disinterest. Well, I did have some idea of putting you to work, he muttered. And you set up Corny Miller and Apache Lang to drag me into that post office robbery too, didn't you? Ray's accusing voice cracked like a whip. It wasn't discussed, Morgan. The answer was stoic. Perhaps the boys, they figured that their own play. And I suppose using my range and my corrals for rustled stock wasn't discussed either, was it? Ray cried. His rocky fist was cocked threateningly. Well, it was Galloway that was no longer worth being heroic about. Taggart might have used a little persuasion on you. Pat put in an unhurried word. What about the attempt to grab those Barry-ass horses, Galloway? And then that attack on my ranch afterwards? He asked sharply. What about that poor girl that Pike Taggart killed in cold blood and dumped on Morgan's door? Suppose all that's a complete mystery to you as well? Mace shrugged. A flicker of old hate showed in his black pupils for just an instant, and he strove to mask it. Oh, Taggart was getting too big for his britches, he growled. You catch up with him, Stevens, and he'll tell you the ins and outs of it. Personally, I do hope you follow him where he's going. Ezra and Sam started towards him, only to halt as Lawler held up a hand in the steady falling snow. That'll do, the sheriff said gruffly. With Stevens' help, I reckon the boys earned this. You'll have your clean slate, Morgan. And see that you keep it clean, too. If necessary, I'll hand Candace a piece of chalk. Sam Sloane tossed in with his ragged smile. Meanwhile, while this storm's blowing, we better head for Dutch Springs. Ezra was firm. That is, if we're all fixin' to show up to that wedding. My guess it'll be soon, and bestn't be postponed in case of cold feet. Without dissent, they turned their horses towards town. End of chapter 20. End of Dig the Spurs Deep.